Step one would be bringing your knee on a yoga block or without yoga block, or both knees down like that. I like it with a yoga block personally because it keeps me forced to bring the knee kind of actively into the ground. Then I lay on my shoulder and I just do active reach aways and in, about 10 repetitions here. Once I feel kind of loosened up, I start doing the twist. So I kind of have to focus on pushing the knee into the ground and at the same time reaching that arm all the way to the ground. Reach away, reach in, twist around. And I like to look in that direction as well. I should feel a nice stretch along here. You go about 10 repetitions of that. Of course, you do the same on the other side. So 10 reach aways, followed by 10 twists. Pushing that knee into the ground actively at the same time. Looking where your arm goes. You're gonna reach away again. You have 10 of these. And then always at the end, you can just lay in this position for a nice 10, 15 seconds and wait for the glutes to release and for the whole sideline. Here's an exercise to stretch out your hip flexors, which are basically the front part of your quadriceps muscle that likes to be tight, especially on people that sit a lot, because that muscle here that brings the leg up ends up being constantly shortened. Okay, so first step is bringing your leg into kind of a lunge position. So whatever leg you want to stretch, in this case the right one, I'm going to curl the toes under. The other one is just kind of 90 degrees forward. And I'm going to work on activating my glutes. So the more my glutes here are activated and my pelvis rotates posteriorly, so forward, the more that chain here gets lengthened. So the muscle that goes around my hip, the hip flexor here in this case, I can really feel a stretch as soon as I activate the glutes. So it's not really about leaning forward or bringing my weight forward. It's more about lengthening that muscle, which comes from something called reciprocal inhibition. So if this muscle here will activate, it'll naturally lengthen the opposite, which is the hip flexor. Okay? So I want to feel first activation, posterior pelvic tilt, and then I can maybe add some of my weight into it and really stretch that muscle out. And with that idea, we're going to go into couch stretches. So with that same idea, stretching the hip flexor, in this case the right hip flexor, I'm going to bring the right leg up on the wall. You can see pretty much my foot is on the wall. The knee is as close as I can to the wall. And the opposite leg is in the front, something like 90 degrees. Okay. For many of you that don't have that flexibility just yet, the knee might be a little bit more in front. That's for you to kind of figure out. The goal again is that you activate your glutes. So if you manage to activate your right glutes and you're going to feel a stretch in your right hip flexor, then that's fantastic. That's the goal. If you can't feel yourself managing to activate the right glutes, take the leg a bit more in front and see if you can find that activation here. If you can't activate the glutes, do the regression that I showed you before. Just work on activating that until you can in the exercise from before. The main goal is really finding out how to activate the glutes so that you get a nice stretch on the front line here of your hip. And only if you can keep your hips activated, your glutes active, then you can start bringing your hip forward into it more. There are two progressions here. So either you're gonna, with your glutes activated, start leaning really far backwards, shoulders to the wall, and really start feeling that your hip is stretching out. Or with your glutes still active, you're gonna start reaching the hip down to the mat, but you need to be conscious of your butt still being turned on. Your glute muscle has to be contracted. Anything between 30 to 1 minute, 30-second holds. You can do pulsations as long as your glutes are turned on, forward. You can just, lean backwards, glutes forwards, lean backwards, but always the glutes are on. All right, step one will be toe stretches. So curling the toes under, putting all my weight on them, and then really trying to stretch out that fascia in the back of my foot. And maybe I can play with my shoulders here. I like to be here for about a minute or two until I start feeling everything releasing. From here, I like to move on into a squat. That should be the step one. Just a nice comfortable squat position. and then slowly opening each side up. So the first side, let's say you start with your right, you're gonna find a good distance. It could also look like this because you don't have a deep squat yet. So if the squat looks like that, that's fine. You're gonna start from here. You're gonna just try to open up that leg. You're gonna do 15 repetitions until you end up in a deep squat, opening out to the inside of the hip, and you can get a really nice stretch across the sideline of your lats and your serratus. Do around 15 repetitions here. And I like to hold the last one for about 15 seconds. And then I go for the opposite side. Again, if you have to, you may be a bit higher. So that's gonna look something like this. Maybe even like that, as long as you get a stretch across here, your groins. If you can't go all the way down, then do so and stretch out your side body. Again, we're going for nice, stretchy 15 repetitions. You can be longer in each rep if you want. You can feel the stretch as you wish. And one of the nice side products of this is that you stretch out your ankles immensely, especially the one that is here, because you end up going quite far with your knees over your toes. And then we hold it for 15 seconds again. The next thing, I grip opposite hand, opposite leg. I try to open up the side body, ideally keeping an anterior pelvic tilt, okay? Yeah, so it would look something like, not too much here, but you're trying to sit quite with a nice flat lower back, and then the rotation should happen as flat as possible. If you rotate a bit, doesn't really matter, but in the perfect world, you're gonna end up with a nice anterior pelvic tilt. And we're gonna do touch the elbow to the ground, and then nice open twist. 15 repetitions. And then at the end, the last one, we usually hold it for 15 seconds. I like to feel how my arm really extends to the opposite side here. I put a lot of my weight into the left ankle, and I like to stretch out that side body. Breathing into my diaphragm, into the belly. And then each exhale, I pull it deeper. I'm gonna do the other side. Same thing, we grab right hand, left shin now. Maybe you're gonna start higher again, right? Maybe you're already down here. You're gonna kind of go quite deep into your ankle if you can. And then go for those 15 rotations. Keeping that anterior pelvic tilt. And we hold 15 seconds. The next exercise is basically just, in yoga they call it malasana. So basically just a deep squat, and you're just gonna open your elbows outwards 15 times. Trying just to feel the groin stretch, so you're trying to feel how your groins are opening up. And as always, 50 repetitions, and then the last one we hold it for about 15 seconds. What I like to personally do here is to also play with my scapulas, just pull them up and down, maybe move around a bit between the ankles, you know, just trying to stretch everything out. Wherever I feel that I need to stretch or whatever I need to move, I move it. Good. And then lastly, I bring my feet a bit closer together, just that's my own personal preference. And my goal here is to bend over, bring my forehead to the ground, okay? So what we can do here is, if you can't reach your forehead all the way to the ground, then what you're gonna do is you're gonna place maybe 2 fists. You're gonna try to touch your forehead on the 2 fists. Maybe you're gonna need 2 thumbs like that until you can touch. And then slowly you're gonna take 1 thumb away, maybe the other thumb away. Maybe you're gonna have just 1 hand and 1 thumb. You know, maybe you're gonna need only the fist, until maybe one day I can't yet touch completely the ground with your forehead. Okay, so here we do also 15 repetitions in whatever regression, progression you need to do it. Okay, you can come all the way out
all the way down, all the way out, all the way down. You should get a nice stretch in your in the back from doing this. 2. And if you want, you can hang out here a little bit, working into your ankles. I like to move a lot when I'm doing these. I just like to open up my ankles and just feel out that I'm stretching the whole back line of my body. And once I finish this, I come out pretty much straight away, standing up to really drill this. And I come back down and I just hang out into my hamstrings. So this will feel something like that. I just go into any type, either a nice anterior tilt here, or I just release. I don't really care anymore about my back here. I bend my legs a little bit. I usually even just hook the arms like that. I just kind of like release into my hamstring. So I bend the legs a bit, and maybe you're gonna look like this, and then slowly start stretching the legs out, and just hang out here for a minute, and just try to stretch out the whole back line of your legs, yeah? With every exhale, you can fall deeper into it. I have very sore hamstrings today, so this is something I really need. You can touch the ground, maybe with your fingers. Maybe you can grab a yoga block so that you elevate it. Doesn't really matter. If you can put palms to the ground, then even better, and then you can just wiggle your legs out, so one after the other. It looks kind of like this if you look at it from this point of view. So I'm putting my hands to the ground, ideally palms flat, and I'm just going leg by leg extended. I think this is called an elephant walk. Yeah, I just like to extend the legs here. It's kind of the same thing we did earlier with the nerve flossing, just a little bit more hardcore. And I don't count, I just do it until I feel good and release. At some point the muscle always likes to let go.
The last exercise I like to do here for my hip is internal rotation. So I like to sit kind of like that. I find stability with my arms behind me, and I'm just going to look for about 10 to 15 repetitions here where my leg turns internally, so I'm bringing that knee to the ground. In a perfect world, your hip bone, so your sits bone here, it wouldn't actually lift off. For me it does, but I still get a really nice stretch around that hip, so I do around 15 reps of this as well. And the rotation of your hip is extremely important, because the better your hip joint moves, so the better your, let's say, the ball in the socket of the hip rotates around and moves and the muscle around it, the less your lower back needs to compensate and do that movement. So many people that have lower back pain, they just need to do a lot of hip rotation and loosen that up so that the lower back doesn't need to carry that load and rotate around, so that the hip can do it. I actually didn't count, but I'm just gonna stop when it feels nice, which it does now. My left side is notoriously way worse, so it's gonna need that left sits bone to lift up a little bit more, which is fine. I don't care, as long as I get that same stretch somewhere. And I want you to be careful with these movements, because we're potentially putting a lot of torque into the knee joint. So this rotation needs to come out of your hip, okay, and not out of your knee. So if you start feeling knee pain, in this case on the inside of the knee, then that means the rotation isn't coming out of the hip, but you're putting pressure into the knee, and you want to really avoid that. That's how you fuck your knee up. Yeah, so the rotation comes really out of the hip joint here, this thing. And maybe, you only go this far. As long as you feel that there is some mobilizing and some movement in the hip, that's fine. Nice.